The translucent cell walls hummed with energy that made Riley's skin prickle. He traced a finger along the barrier, wincing at the static shock that jumped to his fingertip. 3 days trapped in this chamber, or what he estimated was 3 days based on the dimming cycles of the ambient lighting, and he still couldn't quite believe his situation. "I'm an archaeologist, not a spy," Riley muttered to himself for the 100th time, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. The words echoed in the empty cell, bouncing back to him like mocking whispers. The expedition to Tyrannis 4 was supposed to be straightforward: excavate the pre-colonial ruins, document findings, return to Earth with artifacts that might explain the mysterious collapse of the settlement. No one had mentioned the planet had become disputed territory between Earth's colonies and the Vishari Imperium. No one had warned him that crossing the excavation perimeter would trigger proximity sensors and bring down an alien patrol ship. A low hiss announced the cell entrance opening. Riley stood straighter as Commander Vex ducked through the doorway, her tall, willowy frame nearly brushing the ceiling. Like all Vishari, Vex's skin had a faint blue luminescence that intensified around her neck and wrists. The commander's angular face remained expressionless, four amber eyes blinking in unsynchronized patterns. "Your biological readings indicate adequate adaptation to our atmosphere mix," Vex stated, her translator device rendering her complex tonal language into stilted English. "Explain again your purpose on restricted territory." Riley exhaled slowly. "I've told you repeatedly. I'm Dr. Riley Donovan, Earth Archaeological Institute. I was studying ancient human ruins. I'm not military. I'm not a spy." Commander Vex's secondary eyes narrowed while her primary pair remained fixed on Riley. "These ruins you claim to study are situated at a tactical vantage point. Your equipment contains scanning devices. Ground-penetrating radar. For finding buried structures." Riley's frustration bubbled over. "Look at me, do I look like a soldier to you?" The commander moved closer, her height forcing Riley to tilt his head back. She studied him with unsettling intensity, the bioluminescent patterns across her neck pulsing faster. "Your physical structure is unlike our intelligence reports on human military units," she admitted reluctantly. "However, this could be intentional deception." Riley let out a bitter laugh. "Great. So I'm either a spy or a decoy. What about option 3, I'm exactly who I say I am?" Vex circled him slowly, her movements fluid and predatory. "You were found with communication devices. Standard field equipment. Call my institute. They'll confirm everything. Interspecies communication channels require diplomatic authorization," Vex said dismissively. She paused, then added, "Your cellular structure is unusual. Our scanners initially categorized you as a subspecies variant." Riley frowned. "What do you mean?" "You are the first human specimen I have personally encountered," Vex admitted, a note of scientific curiosity entering her voice. "Most Vishari have only seen humans in security briefings." "I'm not a specimen," Riley protested. "I'm a person with rights under the Interstellar Sentient Protection Act." Something like amusement flickered across Vex's alien features. "Treaties only apply to recognized diplomatic entities." She gestured to a hovering drone that entered the cell. "This will extract biological samples for further analysis." Riley backed against the wall. "Wait, you can't just." "Resistance is unnecessary," Vex said, her tone softening slightly. "No permanent harm will come to you if you cooperate." As the drone approached with its array of sampling tools, Riley realized his fate rested entirely in the hands of this alien commander who, until now, had never even met a human. The thought should have terrified him, but something in Vex's curious scrutiny suggested she saw him as more than just another captive, and that might be his only hope. Riley paced the confines of his cell, 7 steps in each direction, a ritual that had become his only form of exercise. 2 weeks had passed since his capture, and the monotony was beginning to wear on his sanity. The biological sampling had been thorough but not cruel, and at least they'd stopped treating him like an immediate threat. Small mercies. The cell door hissed open, and Commander Vex entered, carrying what appeared to be a data tablet. Her luminescent skin seemed to pulse with a different pattern today, more rapid around her throat, Riley noticed. "Your genetic analysis is complete," she announced without preamble. "It confirms you are not a genetically modified infiltration unit." Riley rolled his eyes. "As I've been saying all along." However, Vex continued, ignoring his sarcasm, "Your presence in a militarily significant sector remains unexplained." "Because you won't believe the explanation." Riley threw his hands up in exasperation. "The ruins were built by humans 2 centuries ago. I study ancient settlements. That's my job." Vex tilted her head, her secondary eyes blinking rapidly. "You claim professional interest in structures built merely 2 centuries ago? Our youngest architectural studies begin at minimum with structures 5 millennia old." Riley paused, suddenly understanding part of their disconnect. "For humans, 200 years is a long time. Our recorded history only stretches back about 6,000 years. We're younger than your species." Something shifted in Vex's demeanor, a subtle relaxation of her posture. She approached the small table in the center of the cell and placed her tablet down, activating a holographic display. "I have reviewed your confiscated devices," she said, projecting images of Riley's excavation site. "These patterns of investigation are consistent with archaeological methodology, not military reconnaissance." Riley felt a surge of hope. "So you believe me?" "I am reconsidering your classification," Vex admitted carefully. "Our intelligence on humans is limited. Most information comes from military encounters." Before Riley could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Vex straightened immediately, her luminescence flaring bright blue with alarm. "What's happening?" Riley asked, but Vex was already striding toward the door. The ship lurched violently, throwing them both against the wall. Vex recovered quickly, tapping her wrist communicator and barking orders in her native language. The translator at her neck struggled to keep up, words cutting in and out: "Containment breach, level 3, atmospheric." Another violent shudder rocked the vessel. This time, the energy field of Riley's cell flickered and died. Vex either didn't notice or didn't care as she continued urgent communication with her crew. Riley recognized the tone of an emergency when he heard one. "I can help," he offered, surprising himself. "What's happening?" Vex turned to him, all 4 eyes wide. "Containment failure in the engine core. Toxic gas spreading through ventilation system." "What kind of gas? What's it made of?" Riley asked, archaeologists' instincts kicking in. Analyzing compounds was part of his daily work. "Ceramic plasma coolant. It solidifies in respiratory passages." Riley's mind raced. "On Earth, we neutralize similar compounds with saline solutions. Do you have anything salt-based on board?" Vex stared at him. "Salt is corrosive to Vishari biology." "We do not." "But it might save your crew," Riley interrupted. "Trust me, I've dealt with chemical stabilization in preserved ruins. The principles are similar." A moment of silence hung between them as another alarm joined the cacophony. Vex made her decision, grabbing Riley's arm and pulling him from the cell. "If you attempt escape, emergency protocols will authorize lethal force," she warned as they raced through corridors bathed in pulsing red light. "I'm not trying to escape," Riley said. "I'm trying to help." They reached what appeared to be a laboratory. Crew members in protective gear rushed past, barely glancing at the human in their midst. Vex directed Riley to a workstation and brought up chemical analyses of the leaking coolant. "There," Riley pointed. The molecular structure is similar to compounds we neutralize with sodium chloride solutions. We need salt, water, and a delivery system to the affected areas. Salt stores are in the culinary section, Vex said, already typing commands. Used as a preservative for non-Vishari provisions. Working together, they synthesized a neutralizing agent. When a crew member collapsed outside the lab, struggling to breathe as crystalline structures formed around her mouth, Riley acted instinctively. He grabbed their mixture and knelt beside the fallen alien, looking to Vex for permission. "Do it," she commanded. Riley administered the solution, dissolving the crystals. The crew member gasped, her breathing stabilizing. Hours later, with the crisis contained and the ship's systems under repair, Vex found Riley sitting exhausted in a corner of the lab. "You saved Technician Melis," she said quietly. "And likely others, had the contamination spread further." Riley nodded tiredly. "Just basic chemistry." Vex studied him with all four eyes, her luminescence now a calm, steady glow. "Perhaps I have misjudged what it means to be human. Most of us aren't soldiers or spies," Riley said. "We're just people trying to understand the universe around us." "As are we," Vex replied, and for the first time, Riley saw something like respect in her alien gaze. As she escorted him back to his cell, now upgraded to more comfortable quarters, Riley noticed she walked beside him rather than behind, no longer treating him as a prisoner but as something else entirely. What that was, neither of them could yet define. "These cellular structures are remarkable," Commander Vex murmured, her voice carrying that tone of scientific fascination Riley had grown to recognize over the past month. "Your DNA uses only 4 nucleobases while Vishari biology employs 6. Riley sat patiently as Vex analyzed a holographic representation of his genetic code in her private laboratory. His status had been officially changed from hostile detainee to research subject of xenobiological interest, not exactly freedom, but a significant improvement. "Is that unusual?" he asked, watching the graceful movements of her 6-fingered hands manipulating the display. "Most sentient species we've encountered use at least 5, she explained, her secondary eyes focused on him while her primary pair studied the data. "Your biology achieves remarkable complexity with minimal components." Riley smiled. "Humans tend to make the most of what we have." Something in his tone made Vex pause. The bioluminescent patterns across her neck flickered in what Riley had begun to interpret as embarrassment. "I have not intended to treat you as merely a specimen," she said carefully. "Your assistance during the containment breach has earned you consideration beyond scientific interest. Is that why I'm now allowed to wander sections of the ship?" Riley asked. "And have these private sessions?" He gestured to the laboratory around them, conspicuously empty of other Vishari. Vex's luminescence pulsed rapidly. "My crew questions the resources allocated to studying a single human. These arrangements minimize disruption to ship operations. And keep your growing interest in humanity away from suspicious eyes," Riley added perceptively. Vex stepped closer, towering over him yet somehow no longer intimidating. "The Vishari High Command maintains that humans are resource competitors to be contained, not diplomatic equals to be engaged. My observations suggest otherwise." Their conversation was interrupted by a shudder that ran through Riley's body. A wave of dizziness followed, making him grip the edge of the examination table. "You are unwell," Vex stated, concern evident in her voice. "Just tired," Riley insisted, but another tremor betrayed his lie. Vex activated a scanner and passed it over his body, her expression growing troubled. "Your cellular activity shows signs of systemic inflammation. How long have you felt unwell?" "A couple of days," Riley admitted. "I thought it was just stress." "You've contracted a Vishari pathogen," Vex said, studying the readouts. "Your immune system has no evolved defenses against it." Riley's face paled. "How serious?" "Without treatment, potentially fatal. Vex's voice remained clinical, but her luminescence dimmed with concern. Human-compatible medical supplies are not standard on Vishari vessels. Then I guess this is where our cultural exchange ends, Riley said with grim humor, another shiver racking his frame. Vex's 4 eyes focused intensely on him. No. There is a solution. She moved to a secured cabinet and retrieved a communication device unlike any Riley had seen on the ship before. This is a direct link to neutral trading outposts. Unauthorized for military use, but necessary. You'd risk that for me? Riley asked, surprised. The scientific value of continued observation outweighs regulatory concerns, Vex replied, but the rapid pulsing at her throat suggested other motivations. Days later, Riley awoke in the medical bay, strength returning to his limbs. Vex sat nearby, uncharacteristically still. The treatment worked, she said, noticing his open eyes. But there were complications. What kind of complications? Riley asked, his voice hoarse. The outpost trader recognized you as human. Questions were asked. My superiors now know I've been communicating with external entities regarding a prisoner they believe should have been transferred to a detention center weeks ago. Riley struggled to sit up. You're in trouble because of me. I am in trouble because I have begun to question Vishari policy regarding humans, Vex corrected. Her hand moved hesitantly before resting on his, their first intentional physical contact. The sensation of her cool, smooth skin against his sent an unexpected shiver through Riley. Commander, he began. Avestri, she interrupted. In privacy, you may use my personal designation. The intimacy of the moment hung between them, charged with unspoken implications. Avestri, Riley repeated softly, testing the name. Thank you for saving my life. Her luminescence shifted to a hue he'd never seen before, a soft violet that spread from her throat across her face. The prospect of your termination was unacceptable. Neither spoke of how her fingers remained intertwined with his, or how something fundamental had shifted between captive and captor, human and alien, something that both knew violated every protocol of their respective worlds. Transfer orders have been confirmed, Avestri said, her voice uncharacteristically flat as she entered Riley's quarters without announcement. You are to be relocated to detention facility Carvis in 14 solar cycles. Riley looked up from the Vishari language texts he'd been studying. 2 months aboard the ship had given him enough time to learn basic communication without translation devices, a skill he now wished he didn't need. Carvis, he repeated. That's a permanent facility, isn't it? Avestri's luminescence dimmed to a troubled blue-gray. Yes. My petitions for your reclassification as a diplomatic asset were rejected. Riley set aside the data tablet and approached her. They stood closer now than would have been comfortable weeks ago, the initial alienness of each other's forms having given way to familiar appreciation. Your career, he began, is secondary to certain ethical considerations, she interrupted, her secondary eyes closing briefly in what Riley had come to recognize as an expression of deep emotion. The High Command's position on humans remains unchanged despite my research submissions. So that's it, Riley said quietly. After all this, I just disappear into some alien prison. Avestri's 4 eyes fixed on him with unusual intensity. There is an alternative path, she said, her voice dropping lower. One that violates every oath I have sworn to the Imperium. Riley's heart quickened. You're talking about helping me escape. I am talking about accompaniment, she corrected. You lack the necessary knowledge of Vishari systems to navigate independently. The implication stunned him. You'd leave with me? Abandon your post, your people? I would pursue truth, Avestri replied. The policy of segregation between our species is founded on ignorance and fear. What I have learned through our interactions contradicts centuries of military doctrine. Riley closed the remaining distance between them, daringly placing his hand against the luminescent patterns of her neck. Her skin was cool and smooth under his fingers, the bioluminescence warming at his touch. "This isn't just about scientific truth, is it?" he asked softly. The patterns under his fingers pulsed rapidly. "No," she admitted. "It is not." "Then tell me," Riley urged. Without scientific terminology or diplomatic language. Avestri's hand came up to cover his. "There is no Vishari word for the concept. The closest approximation would be resonance across difference. On Earth, we might call it attraction," Riley suggested. "Or something more." "Yes," she acknowledged, her luminescence shifting to that rare violet hue he'd seen only in their most intimate moments. "Something more. Something forbidden. Worth leaving everything behind for?" Riley pressed. "That is the question we both must answer," Avestri said. "My plan requires implementation within 2 cycles, before the transfer authorization fully processes. You must decide if your freedom is worth the risk of failure. And you must decide if I'm worth becoming an exile," Riley finished. Avestri's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "I have accessed your research from the confiscated devices. Your work seeks to understand how civilizations adapt and survive across challenging boundaries. Perhaps we are merely continuing that research through direct experience." Riley laughed softly, the tension of the moment breaking. "A practical field study in cross-species adaptation? An unprecedented opportunity for original research," she agreed, humor entering her voice. Their hands remained connected, human warmth meeting alien coolness in a balance neither had imagined possible before their chance encounter. "I've spent my life studying how different peoples find ways to coexist," Riley said finally. "It would be hypocritical to reject the chance to prove it's possible between our species." The decision made, they began to plan their escape, no longer captor and captive but co-conspirators against a universe determined to keep them apart. The shuttle bay erupted into chaos as alarm systems detected the unauthorized launch sequence. Riley worked frantically at the controls Avestri had taught him to operate, while she secured the final launch protocols. "We have 3 minutes before security overrides engage," she said, her luminescence pulsing with tension. "The course to the neutral trading post is pre-programmed." "Will they pursue us?" Riley asked, fingers flying over the alien interface. "Certainly," Avestri confirmed. "But the commander's vessel is not designed for rapid pursuit. We will have sufficient." The shuttle bay doors slid open, interrupting her. Supreme Officer Draux entered with 2 security personnel, their weapons drawn. "Commander Vex," Draux's voice boomed, using her formal title. "Explain this unauthorized activity." Avestri straightened to her full height, her luminescence shifting to formal patterns of respect even as she positioned herself protectively before Riley. "I am facilitating necessary diplomatic proceedings, Supreme Officer," she replied in Vishari, her translator inactive. Riley understood enough to follow the exchange. "By stealing a shuttle with a human prisoner?" Draux demanded, advancing. "The High Command has deemed this specimen suitable only for detention and study. The High Command's assessment is based on deliberate misinformation," Avestri responded, her voice gaining strength. "My extended study of this human has yielded evidence that contradicts our species' understanding of humanity." Riley watched as the security personnel exchanged uncertain glances. Avestri's reputation as a meticulous scientist clearly carried weight. "You risk everything for unsubstantiated theories," Draux warned. "Not theories. Findings." Avestri activated her data tablet, projecting comparative analyses between Vishari and human cognition, cultural artifacts, and neurological responses. "Humans demonstrate every marker we use to define sentient diplomatic equals. The policy of containment is scientifically unsupportable." For a moment, doubt flickered across Draux's features. Then her expression hardened. Your judgment has been compromised by prolonged contact with the subject. Yes, Avestri agreed unexpectedly. Through proximity, I have gained understanding impossible through distant observation. That is the essence of scientific discovery, direct engagement with the unknown. She turned to Riley, switching to English. Complete the launch sequence. As Riley turned back to the controls, Drelks raised her weapon. This action constitutes treason against the Imperium. It constitutes progress, Avestri countered. I formally invoke right of conscience under Scientific Charter Article 7. My findings require dissemination beyond military control. The invocation clearly surprised Drelks, an ancient protocol rarely invoked but still legally binding. In the moment of hesitation that followed, Riley activated the final launch sequence. The shuttle doors sealed automatically as the security lockdown engaged, separating them from Drelks and her officers. Will that really protect you from treason charges? Riley asked as the shuttle disengaged from the main vessel. No, Avestri admitted, taking her place at the navigation console. But it will require formal scientific review of my findings rather than immediate military judgment. The shuttle lurched as it cleared the bay, accelerating rapidly. Behind them, the Vishari ship grew smaller, its pursuit capabilities limited by protocol and procedure that Avestri had expertly navigated to their advantage. Where exactly are we going? Riley asked once the immediate danger of pursuit had passed. Nexus Station, Avestri replied. A trading hub beyond Imperium jurisdiction. Multiple species coexist there despite biological and cultural differences, proof that our path is viable. Riley studied her alien features, now familiar and dear to him. And after that? Unknown, she admitted, her luminescence settling into the violet hue that had become unique to their private moments. But I have hypotheses worth testing. Riley laughed. Always the scientist. The universe rewards curiosity, Avestri said, reaching for his hand. Without it, I would never have discovered that humans are capable of resonance across difference. Love, Riley corrected gently. The word you're looking for is love. An imprecise term, she noted, but I find it increasingly accurate. As Nexus Station appeared on their view screen, a sprawling structure where dozens of species coexisted in a chaotic harmony, Riley reflected on how far they had come from their first encounter. From captor and captive to pioneers of a new possibility between their peoples. We will face prejudice from both our species, Avestri cautioned as they prepared to dock. Good thing we're both researchers, Riley replied. We'll document everything, the first comprehensive study of human-Vishari coexistence. An original contribution to knowledge, Avestri agreed, her scientists' pride evident. As their small shuttle docked at the station that would become their new home, Riley realized that his archaeological passion for understanding how different peoples adapt to change had led him to become part of that very process, crossing boundaries not just of planets or ruins, but of biology and culture in the most intimate way possible. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of symmetry.